This week in Billionaires, shares in nuclear power startup Oklo shot up by 47% over the last week, spurred by excitement around the potential for nuclear energy to power the AI boom. The stock's surge made the 12-year-old company's husband and wife co-founders, Jacob DeWitt and Carolyn Cochran, into new billionaires, each worth $1.7 billion. Cochran, who is 42 years old, is one of just 36 self-made women billionaires in the US. Tech giant Oracle has minted 2 new billionaires thanks to its soaring stock price. Former chairman and CFO Jeffrey Henley and former chief corporate architect Edward Scriven are now each worth an estimated $1.1 billion, as Oracle shares have soared by 115% in the last 6 months. Oracle is now the 12th most valuable company in the world, and its rise has also helped cement co-founder Larry Ellison's place as the world's second richest person. The late billionaire fashion designer Giorgio Armani's will was unsealed on September 11th, revealing his plans for his namesake company's future. Forbes estimates that Armani's main heirs, his right-hand man Pantaleo Dell'Orco, his sister Rosanna Armani, and his nieces and nephews Andrea Camerana, Silvana Armani, and Roberta Armani, are all new billionaires. That's thanks to the cut of the profits they stand to receive from a sale of Armani's company within 5 years of his death, according to the terms of the will. Welcome to Beyond the Billions. My name is Giacomo Tognini, a deputy editor here at Forbes. And joining me today are Phoebe Liu, who's been covering tech billionaires for 3 years here at Forbes, and Rashi Shrivastava, who's been covering AI on the tech team here at Forbes for 4 years. Thank you so much to you both for joining me. And just to get things started, can we confirm for the viewers that this is not AI, that we're all real people here today?
Okay, so Giacomo was only asking me this because the top comment on a video I did last year was, she is so uncanny valley, she couldn't possibly be human. So I'm here to debunk those allegations. I'm most definitely not AI.
That's beating the allegations. And Rashi, you too, I presume.
Yes, definitely not AI. I'm a human speaking human, very human way.
Amazing. So first off, Phoebe, what made you interested in covering tech billionaires? And then, same for you, Rashi, what sort of drew you to AI reporting?
Yeah, so I actually studied computer science in college. I took a machine learning class. I remember spending 3 days trying to kind of reinforcement learn Flappy Bird and just watching the computer slowly getting better at Flappy Bird. So I've kind of always been interested in the subject area and kind of came into reporting from a totally different lens as a classical music concert reviewer. So those two kind of converged here at Forbes, and I feel very lucky to get to tell the stories of people who have so much influence on our society.
I always really loved writing. I grew up sort of, writing and having a passion for writing, and tech specifically. I think AI wasn't in the plan, but after ChatGPT exploded, and it's just been AI ever since. There's been a lot to write about, a lot of interesting things happening in this space, and as Phoebe mentioned, they're very powerful people. So writing about their stories and uncovering the business behind these massive businesses has been great as well.
Yeah, and speaking of that, you both recently covered CoreWeave, sort of massive, very much talked about company in the AI space right now. It's minted several billionaires, so really sort of the intersection of what you both cover. First off, if you can give sort of a non-jargon, very sort of brief explanation of what CoreWeave does, and then if you both want to sort of dig into how, you first came to hear of this story and got involved in it.
CoreWeave is basically, the business is actually pretty simple. What they do is they buy NVIDIA GPUs and they rent out access to the computational power to some of the biggest AI names today, like Microsoft, OpenAI, and Meta. The key here is the GPUs. These are basically very advanced chips that are really good at running calculations and processing information. That is very key for AI training and running these AI models. So that's basically how CoreWeave, that's what they do essentially.
Yeah, and just to add one other element to it, part of why they could scale so quickly in an industry where kind of speed is king was they're commodities trader guys with a lot of experience with kind of structured finance and really complex deals. And they were kind of able to convince the debt markets to finance really big purchases of the GPUs. And a lot of their debt is actually secured by the kind of depreciating value of those GPUs. So it's like collateralized with the GPUs, and that was kind of a financing model that they more or less pioneered, which allowed them to kind of move faster than some of their competitors at first.
Yeah, I found that really fascinating in your story, which obviously I encourage everyone to read after this video. But, how was it? How did you sort of come to actually meeting them? You obviously spoke with Michael Intrater and then, other executives there. How did that sort of relationship start, I guess, when you first reached out to them and found the story? Because obviously it was something that I think you both had covered, but that was before you actually went over and met them. And, you went to the data centers too. So, give us sort of a behind the scenes look at that.
Yeah, so Rashi's been writing about CoreWeave for a couple of years, so I'll let you take that.
Yeah, so I actually was connected to the person who runs their PR, and we'd been talking about doing a deeper dive into the company. It just seemed like a good time to do this story. CoreWeave had just gotten public. Obviously, we'd also covered that they'd also become billionaires, and along with their co-founders, some of the early investors had also become billionaires. The timing was just right. We met all of the co-founders. We spoke with them they have an office in New Jersey, so we visited their headquarters there, and then we also visited them in New York City and got to have lunch with Mike Intrater, where we talked about everything from his sort of backstory and how he was really, he wanted to become a forest ranger and was very into sort of the nature, like natural landscapes, and ended up becoming a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company today. So that was fascinating.
And it was one of the bigger IPOs this year too, right? So sort of a fascinating time to cover it, right?
One
With
of the
so many,
first AI IPOs as well. One of the first AI companies to go public.
right? So many of these massive valuations that we've been seeing in the space, and then they actually went public. How was, I guess, a question I had when I was reading it was, and to your point, Rashi, it doesn't seem like a very revolutionary sort of concept, right? They have the GPUs, they rent them out. Is there anything that really sort of sets them apart from others doing the same? I know there's obviously other players like Crusoe, who you've also covered before, Rashi. What to you both, I guess, makes them stand out? Or is it maybe the personalities behind them that stand out? Because obviously, fascinating people, as people will see from reading the article.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll say a little bit and then Rashi, you can add to it. But I think our understanding from talking to both CoreWeave and several of CoreWeave's competitors is that their kind of speed and scale is the largest component of their moat. I think CoreWeave will also say that some of their technical elements are kind of better optimized for AI-specific use cases than others, but I think their competitors would say differently.
CoreWeave definitely had an early mover advantage, right? Like these were people who were mining crypto for years, so they knew how to run GPUs. They knew the basics, but they were early on to realize that their GPUs were better for more than just mining Ethereum, and so they decided to learn how to get an AI compute cluster up and running. And they did this from like a company called, it was a nonprofit. It wasn't even a company. It was a nonprofit called Luther AI, and these were just like 4 people on a Discord channel, and they'd help them build like their first compute cluster. So they definitely identified that this is something that's going to grow in the future and that's going to create a massive business opportunity. And they moved in early. And now we're seeing competition. Definitely there are companies like Crusoe, Nebius, bunch of other players. Lambda is another one. There are a bunch of other players now in this space, and they all have access to the same chips. But CoreWeave's head start has really helped it grow really quickly.
So obviously CoreWeave has had a ton of success already, right? We mentioned the IPO, but also, going off on Rashi's point about the competitors, this is a company that obviously has a lot of debt, like we've talked about, with the sort of the collateralized by the chips, which is kind of comes from the background of the founders, who obviously are not the usual Silicon Valley types. They've been tremendously successful, multiple billionaires minted, but you're both financial reporters here at Forbes, so you've obviously taken a look at, the financials and talked to analysts and investors on what the future of the company looks like. So how do you both sort of think about the company's future and how sustainable this model will be?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess a couple of things here. I think in our story, we framed CoreWeave as kind of a bet that the demand for new GPUs, as many as possible, as fast as possible, will continue to skyrocket as it has in the last several years, which is what enabled CoreWeave to become a 60-some billion dollar market cap business.
And it's a pretty young company too, right?
Yeah, it was founded in 2017 and didn't really start doing major AI work until a couple of years ago, which is crazy. I think in terms of CoreWeave's debt, it depends on whether CoreWeave can kind of refinance and pay down that debt and then borrow additional debt at lower and lower interest rates, getting closer and closer to kind of investment grade debt. At the same time, Rashi and I were asking kind of the co-founders about kind of the structure of CoreWeave's major contracts. And the way they kind of explain it is that for every $1 they need to spend kind of servicing and paying off that debt, they have $2 of revenue coming in. And the way that revenue works is that there is some kind of a lump sum upfront payment, regardless of what work is done, and then a monthly payment once they start using the GPUs. So the revenue stream is pretty stable. The interest payments are also pretty stable. So it just depends on kind of the cost of the GPUs and the cost of kind of the infrastructure build-outs to see if that debt can actually be paid down throughout the course of the contract.
Yeah. I mean, just to, add to that, I think the big question here is, are we in an AI bubble, right? Like, is the demand for these GPUs going to continue growing at the pace that CoreWeave is definitely betting that it is going to keep on growing? And for in terms of its business model, I think debt has been the key here in terms of how quickly CoreWeave has been able to scale. And it has 33 data centers, and this was a former crypto mining company that no one had heard of, and raising some $29 billion of debt has helped it get there. So it's definitely a big part of CoreWeave's business. And it has these massive customers like Microsoft and Meta and OpenAI that are definitely they have the cash to pay these bills and to complete its contracts. The question is, will they continue to come back for more contracts down the lane for more AI training, I guess.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely a fascinating sort of story to watch. And that sort of leads me into another thing I wanted to ask Phoebe specifically before shifting back to Rashi and her AI coverage. But Phoebe, you also had an incredible story out very, very recently about Edwin Chen, the founder of Surge AI, correct me if I'm wrong here, but a sort of data labeling startup that's grown really large. If you could sort of briefly talk a bit about that. He's a fascinating guy. I urge everyone to read the story because it's incredible. But, if you could say a little bit about Surge, Edwin, and what stood out to you about him among all of these, so many different AI entrepreneurs we were reading about and talking about.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess what struck me most about Edwin, and this sounds really cliche because a lot of people say it, but he's really an original thinker. I asked him and I asked a lot of the people who work really closely with him, hey, does he have any role models, entrepreneurs that he maybe looks up to and wanted to model his career after? Immediately no, not at all. He's just kind of his own person, swims in his own lane. I was asking him kind of what his favorite thing to do is, and he was like, I like to take walks around midnight around Times Square, which
I
to
think
me
is crazy as someone who lives in New York.
Right. It's so chaotic. When I go through Times Square, it's overwhelming and I want to get out as fast as possible. But he moved from San Francisco, Silicon Valley to New York to kind of see the richness of humanity. That's a phrase that he really likes. And that's kind of what he wants Surge to be able to encode. He was kind of talking to me about the short story that inspired Arrival, basically saying that he wants AI and the data labeling that Surge and others do to be able to kind of encode human intelligence in a way that theoretically, if aliens existed and came, we would be able to kind of communicate with them through that encoded language that goes beyond just words and into kind of the zeros and ones that underpin large language models, which is really cool to me. And I guess one other thing about him that I thought was really funny and didn't make it into the story is that he is vegan and loves animals. And one of his earliest employees, who was actually an indie pop drummer for a decade plus before working at Surge, had heart surgery, and Edwin decided to send him a mobile petting zoo to make him feel better. across the country. And he showed me a picture on Zoom of him holding this just like fully giant pig. And that picture is one of the most commonly used Slack reactions by Edwin and his team in the Surge Slack. I don't actually know. This is just what he told me. But I think that kind of shows kind of his character and kind of where he stands in the data labeling race. Surge is currently the biggest by revenue, but Scale AI is probably the most well-known competitor. There's a Forbes cover of the Scale guy somewhere behind me, Alex Wong. And there's also Mercor, which surpassed 500 million in annual revenue run rate. I want to say a couple weeks ago. There's Turing, there's Invisible. There are a lot of companies kind of realizing how lucrative of a field this is, and they're all kind of competing for the same really big customers. And at the same time, we don't really know how long this like heavily human data annotation will last, because it's getting more and more specialized. There are literally like Harvard professors trying to stump these models, and it's not always easy anymore. It's a lot of the times humans trying to kind of review what AI spits out and kind of compare responses, right, which one's better. And yeah, it's just everything in the industry is changing so fast that it's hard to know exactly where it's going. But one thing is for sure that at least for now, Edwin, who controls 75% of the company, which we're estimating is worth around 24 billion, has a very outsized role in shaping the future of the industry.
Yeah, and fascinating also. I mean, Alex was, I think at one point, the youngest self-made billionaire in the world. Now Edwin was the youngest on the Forbes 400 list of the richest Americans. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting with CoreWeave as well, right? These enormous fortunes being created, these enormous companies, and all of this demand for the data annotation, and then on the other side, the sort of the GPUs and sort of seeing how long this will last, right? And, to that point, Rashi, you write an incredible newsletter called The Prompt on AI. You've covered so many different companies and startups. What are some of your big takeaways or sort of favorite things you've covered, recently and since you've been delving into AI?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think it's an understatement to say that the AI world is always in a state of flux. Every day we wake up and there's something new happening, and sort of a new sort of story that we're chasing. Just in I think in the past few months, we've realized how important talent is to AI companies, and we saw like Mark Zuckerberg throwing around like $100 million pay packages to hire, scoop up and basically hire a lot of folks from OpenAI and
And
other
you had a
companies.
fantastic story about that too, not too long
Yes,
ago.
we wrote about that. Yes, we wrote about that recently, and sort of around how folks are reacting to that and how the talent landscape is changing. And that definitely some of these startups are changing too, right? Like where we were talking about Alex Wang recently, he's no longer at Scale. He's now at Meta's super intelligence team. So there's a lot of stuff changing, a lot of money being poured into AI right now. I read somewhere that I think $200 billion of VC funding has already gone into AI this year. And like that number is just huge. It's kind of hard to contextualize how much money is being spent here and how much investment these companies are raising. And I think we're at the stage sort of now 3 years from 2022 where we're like people are asking the question of like where is the money being made? Like where's all this money flowing to? Who's making money? And if AI is even being profitable, because like most of these companies aren't profitable. We're still sort of trying to find like where is profit being made in this space. So yeah, I think it's an exciting space. There's always new things happening, and it's been wonderful covering a lot of startups in this space too.
And I guess just to wrap things up, is there a particular sort of storyline or briefly one thing you're really looking at this year within AI, sort of a particular company or person or trend that you think is going to sort of make or break the coverage?
So I'm really interested in two things right now. One, looking at kind of how increasingly divorced startup valuations are becoming from their kind of underlying financials, and like what are the chances that they exit at something that would actually give investors a return, like who's going to get burnt when this all not inevitably, but once the market kind of corrects itself. and kind of aligns better with financials. That'll be super interesting. And the other thing is, I think there is a lot around power right now. I think the UK and the US just signed a deal that is very bullish on nuclear power, and I think there's a lot there that could play into how this AI revolution continues to grow.
Yeah, I think for me, like just following the sort of line of reporting that we're doing around talent, just right now with the H-1B news that came out, the $100,000 fee, we're working on a story related to that. And so I think immigration is continuing to be a question, especially for like top tier AI talent and AI researchers. So that's something that I'm interested in. And then continuing to find the sort of buzzy AI companies that are truly like doing something that's different and innovative and have inspiring stories that we could tell. So that's what I'm focusing on.
It's been so fascinating hearing from both of you, sort of the backstory behind these stories, and thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Giacomo.
Thank you for having us. Thanks.
You can find Phoebe and Rashi's story on CoreWeave and the other stories we mentioned today in the interview notes.